Charlie, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
To be able to give you some questions, ask you some questions. And I would like to begin a bit historically. Mm-hmm. There are many photos in the internet showing your dad with your granddad, and your dad is a little kid. I've got some materials.
Oh, wow.
I'm prepared. When he's almost a baby.
Yeah.
But here is you with
this
your
is
granddad.
me.
And my question is very simple. How did you catch this virus, car virus? Was it like with your dad that he, well, was coming to the workshop, to the granddad's workshop? Were you coming to the workshop? Were you like little Dino Ferrari who was all the time dirty with smears and, you know, petrol?
So, funny enough, it was probably around that age, so 3 or 4. I would go to car shows. There's a big mini kind of collection of cars that come every year at a place called Bewley. So the National Museum.
Very famous.
So I used to go there in the summer. I think that's where that photo is taken, actually. So I was always surrounded by cars and grew up with it. I think I really got the bug when I was a little bit older, but still very young, still at school. My grandfather took me to a British Grand Prix, and it was when I must have been 11, 12, something like that, and Ayrton Senna was still alive, and I became a massive Ayrton Senna fan. Ron Dennis was there as well, and they all knew my grandfather. Ron Dennis, actually, who obviously was running McLaren at the time, he was an apprentice for my grandfather, so he started his career with Cooper cars. So that's when I probably got the bug for cars and loved cars, yeah.
And it stays still today.
Of course, yeah.
I think that I remember also when I first met you, also in the internet, I saw you beginning with car racing. You also raced in the Classic Mini, did you ever?
Yeah, well, funny enough, when I was a lot younger, I had a go-kart. I did kind of small local things. My grandfather was still alive, and I think because of his generation, he didn't want me to get into racing. He didn't really want any of his family to get into racing because motorsport, he probably still had the perception, and I think it probably was when I was younger, it was more dangerous than it is today. Yes. But it was even more dangerous in the 1950s and 60s, obviously. So I think just the family attitude was don't get into racing. So my sport was playing rugby, big British sport, but I only started racing actually when I started working more heavily with Mini again as an ambassador. So probably 2016, 17, I got my race license and then started racing Minis, and then had my first race in a Classic Mini as well.
The Classic Mini. Then you switched to the new Mini.
Yeah, I actually started in the new Minis, and then I think the first season I did it, I was invited by BMW Mini Classic, said, do you want to come and race at the Goodwood Revival? Yeah. Which I had been going to for years previously anyway. So to race at the Revival was incredibly special.
Well, no wonder your granddad wasn't very eager that you would start racing. He had very bad experience with this double-engined Mini, famous accident. Well,
of course, yeah.
So.
Which if you think about it, I spoke to my dad about the Twinny Mini.
Twinny
Mini with
right.
It was actually they just kind of created, they welded the front axle together and put it on the rear. So it was 2 engines, but it was only a prototype vehicle. And obviously, as you say, there was a big accident my grandfather had that was, I think, the start of the end of his Formula 1 involvement. I think Formula 1, he had to travel a lot, and I think surviving that accident made him give up on Formula 1, I think.
Do you know whether this Twinny Mini had 1 gearbox or 2 gearboxes?
It actually had 2 gearboxes, but it was very much like...
with 1 lever?
But they just stuck the 2 together.
Okay.
So they were synced like manually. But apparently the performance of the Twinny Mini from a rally, my grandfather had the idea for rallying. Obviously they had already had the Monte Carlo victory. It was incredibly potent on off-road driving. So it was way before you think of the Audi Quattro that came many years after. It would have won rally races, but I think after my grandfather's accident, the project stopped. Yes. It wasn't so good because of the weight. It wasn't so good on track, but for rallying, it would have been perfect.
It would be perfect. All right, now another historical question. Father of the Mini, Mr. Isigonis, was a brilliant person, but as all brilliant people, he was also stubborn.
Yeah.
And as I remember, at the beginning, he just wanted to create a people's car.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to hear a word about luxurious minis or sports minis.
Yeah.
My question is, how did your grandpa manage to convince stubborn Isigonis to give it a sort of green light, because Isigonis was very well positioned in BMC those days, and I think his people, well, listened to him. And suddenly he changed his mind. How did it happen?
Well,
was it difficult?
You're right. That from what I know, Alec Isigonis was quite stubborn, but he was a good friend of my grandfather's.
That's what I heard.
They used to. Isigonis actually used to race cars a little, for fun. They used to go to the Brighton speed trials, and they would race against each other. So my grandfather was good friends with Isigonis. So I think they probably have what we say in English, a playful banter, I imagine. My grandfather was always quite convincing. But you're right, at first it was the people's car, it was in response to an oil crisis, it was never supposed to be a race car.
Absolutely.
But I think my grandfather, the story is that my grandfather saw the potential when Alec had actually lent him a car, one of the early cars in 1959, and he took it to the Monza Grand Prix. And he let the drivers have a go, and they all thought the balance of this car. It was back then. It was a very unique car. It was strange. The only small cars like that. There was a BMW, obviously, a few years before, but it was an odd-looking car for the time. I mean, we look back as the classic Mini as an icon, but when it first came out, it was kind of seen as a slightly strange car. But they were all amazed at the handling of the car. And there is a story, I don't know if it's true or not, that my grandfather gave the keys to one of the Aston Martin works drivers because he had to get back to London. It was, I forget the name now, the driver, it'll come back to me. But he had his DB4 at the time, and he swapped the keys for the Mini to the DB4 and gave the mechanic the keys to the DB4, and they had a race back to London, and apparently the Mini won the race back to London.
Really?
So that was the first ever race a Mini won, was from
I also found, well, I found a photo where your grandfather has a chart.
That's probably when he's trying to convince him to do,
And this very first sort of prototype of Mini Cooper that was not looking exactly like later factory Mini Coopers, but it was supposed to be one of the first prototypes.
Of course, the thing is about the Mini Cooper, you say, how did he convince him? I think initially it was like, look, just homologate it. This isn't for commercial reasons. Just we needed to get 1,000 made so they could go racing with it. I mean, my grandfather, as kind of an entrepreneurial businessman, even said to BMC, just say you're going to make 1,000, you don't have to. But I think because of Cooper's name in Formula One, the success they had
was very important,
it became a huge success straight away. They sold way more than 1,000. I think initially it was, tens of thousands, and I think they were pleased they did it, obviously. But I think initially it wasn't supposed to be a commercial thing. It was just purely for racing reasons.
So this convincing was partly like just conversation of friends, but your grandfather was very convinced that it will be a success, I think. He knew what he was doing.
Absolutely. I think the feedback from race drivers that drove it, the fact, the balance, the wheels, obviously we always talk about go-kart handling nowadays, but just where the wheels are positioned on the chassis just gave it perfect balance.
Absolutely.
And it's a unique car to drive, actually, the classic Mini, the original Mini, as I've raced it at places like Goodwood. It's just so easy to kind of throw around, get the rear to move around.
Right.
So just a perfect balanced car, and I think my grandfather just said it needs a bit more power, better brakes, and it could be a great race car.
One more thing about Classic Mini. There are three things I will never understand about Mini. Why? First BMC, then British Leyland, then Rover, having such a marvel, having such a bestseller, having such a gem. First of all, they never produced a hatchback, except some prototype from 61 or 62. Second of all, why they didn't start a serious ragtop production, cabriolet, well, convertible, despite those funny 260 Rover Mini cabriolets, but it's nothing comparing to what, for instance, Volkswagen did with Golf.
Yeah. Or even nowadays with the Mini now, the cabriolet is the biggest selling cabriolet I think in its class in the world. So
right.
The volume is far bigger. Yeah.
And third thing I will never understand that, well, when Mini was beginning, 4 gears was okay, but during its very long life, most cars had 5 gears. Why didn't? I think it was in the days of Leyland or already, or even Rover. Why didn't they decide to put a 5 gearbox? I know it was very difficult as you had to cramp it all in the sump. And the only, let's say, not mass produced, but produced Mini with 5 gears was made by
Sport 5,
S5, yes.
I asked my dad this because I had the same questions. I was the hatchback. There was a few. Ringo Starr even had a.
But those were Radford
exactly. They were conversions.
This was the original BMC prototype.
With the hatchback.
With the hatchback.
And the answer, which my father, when I spoke to him, is a really boring one. It's just for homologation costs.
Oh, I see.
It was purely a financial reason. And
money issue.
I think, BMC obviously then into Rover. Maybe they should have done if you look at the history of what happened. And,
I think so.
And maybe the amazing thing of the Mini story and the Mini Cooper story is how BMW have looked after the brand and managed to make it a success, both profitably. So maybe there's certain decisions. I mean, the Mini lasted for so many years in that guise, with obviously only minor tweaks for homologation, things like airbags that came in. But the cabriolet, the hatchback, just didn't happen because of homologation, and also with the Sport 5, the gearbox.
Because I'm most interested in the Sport 5, because you produced this version.
We did, and like I said, my father gave me some details. He actually said here about the Sport 5, if I find his message.
My point is, was it difficult to exchange this 4 gearbox, classic 4 gears gearbox to the 5 gears?
It was actually designed by someone called Jack Knight.
Knight.
And he made gearboxes for the Formula cars, so Formula 2, Formula 3. They said the problem was they were incredibly expensive. So even when my father was doing it, the tooling, they were one-offs. So you had to have a very specialist maker. And like you said, to get it in the sump, it was a bit of an engineering challenge. And to mass produce with homologation would have just been too costly. So
okay, so but anyway, your granddad managed to do it. So people that wanted to have 5 gears
could have one.
Could have one from Cooper Car Company.
Exactly, yeah.
That's right. Now I would like to refer to 1990. You were already with us.
I was probably in my being a young sort of 8-9-year-old, in the garage, in my holidays.
Because British Leyland in some way axed the Cooper, starting to produce the Sport Clubman version called Mini 1275 GT. That's right. After 10 years of production, they stopped. it was. I don't think it reached. It was reaching the proper selling volumes and so on and so on. And then, so it happened in 1980, and then there was, as they stopped to produce the GT. Then there was a 10 years gap with no sport version, no Cooper, no anything. And in 1990, this is a first prototype of made in Surbiton, I think, of a new Cooper, a Cooper Resurrection. My question is, did your granddad and probably your father too, did they felt a great satisfaction that Cooper is back?
Massively. I think my dad gets quite emotional when he speaks about that, because during the 80s he had, with my grandfather, a big project to kind of revive the Cooper name with Mini. So the 1275 was obviously the replacement, which never really took off.
That's right.
It had some racing success. There was the Longman cars that won British touring cars.
Famous Longman, yeah.
But it, for whatever reason, I think it didn't have the magic of Cooper, the legacy that Cooper had in Formula One. But in the 80s, when it was disappeared, my father and grandfather were still making kits, so you could still convert your Mini into a Mini Cooper if you bought
just
a kit.
an ordinary Mini. Yeah.
And they, funnily enough, one of the markets that helped it grow was Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mariyama's son, who I went to visit a couple of years ago in Japan, he wanted to supply the market in Japan, and there was huge demand. And my father and grandfather would make these beautiful boxes that they would send over to Japan.
I've seen them, yeah, wooden boxes.
Yeah, they sell on
set
eBay now. Yeah, so they're collector's items, but these beautiful, hand painted as well. There was a painter that used to come into the workshop and paint these boxes that went off to Japan. So he
rocker cover was there, exhaust system,
yeah,
carburetor,
yeah. Yeah, the whole
things like that.
All packaged.
It depended how big the set you ordered. But
exactly, you could vary what size you ordered.
But it was beautiful. It was
really done well, and I think the success of that led. And my father and grandfather had the idea to resurrect the Cooper with Rover, and they were immensely proud that it came back, and again was a success. So you look through all the way through the 90s, and the last classic Mini, as we call them, off the production line was a Mini Cooper.
It was a Mini Cooper. I think it is Sport 500.
The Sport, yeah. I think it was a Sport S.
Okay.
Yeah. Cooper S Sport.
Yeah, the red one.
Yes.
I remember it rolling off the production line, and well, everyone was very moved, touched, sad, whatever. But so I expected that they were very satisfied and very happy. Yeah. I read somewhere that it was based on a Mini Mifer, an ordinary version, but of course they put all those things inside, their secrets.
Well, they obviously, Cooper's renowned for racing and what my grandfather achieved with Cooper in Formula One. But my father and grandfather, you say as a Agonis wanted it as a simple car. They used to like to make cars special inside as well. So even through the 80s, when Cooper wasn't an official production car, they would build cars for special people that had, I think they even put Rolls-Royce carpet in there. They did all sorts of things. So it was all about making special cars, not just in performance, but
not just performance. Yes, I remember all those special versions coming out of the factory in a workshop, but they were special inside as well. Well, show must go on. Classic Mini finished its life, but the legend, thanks to BMW, thanks to new Mini, goes on. We all know that the birth of new Mini wasn't that easy. It was not so obvious as it is now, that people say, oh, Mini, and everyone thinks about BMW Mini. I remember people, especially older people, were not so keen and not so happy. Now there is a second generation. Their children are buying BMW Minis, children of those people who were against
And the first generation BMW Mini is a classic now. It's over 20 years old. So it itself is a classic.
That's right. But I would like to ask you, how do you think BMW offers also many versions. Classic Mini offered only special editions. BMW offers really very different versions.
Yeah.
How do you think, will BMW surprise us with something completely new, except the, let's say, electric units or hybrid units? But will they do something new in terms of body, in terms of its capacity, its well, measurements, or the body lines, what is most important?
I mean, I'm lucky as an ambassador. I work quite closely with the brand, so and the team often ask me questions. I'm involved in workshops, so I can't tell you too much, but there's some really interesting projects on the way, some that I'm really excited about that I hope they happen. So yeah, watch this space. There's definitely evolving things happening with the Mini brand that I think will excite people and surprise people maybe.
So I understand that we should wait patiently, and there will be a reward for our waiting.
I think so. We were launching all the John Cooper Works family obviously this year. The current range, I'm obviously here in Poland to launch the John Cooper Works range.
Yeah.
It's the first time we've gone electric, which is an exciting time for the brand. I think much like when the new Mini launched, there'd be some people questioning it, saying this isn't Mini, why does John Cooper Works go electric? But I think I would generally say people drive the cars. The engineers, I got to drive some of the pre-production vehicles, the development vehicles, so I saw how it changed. And the engineering going into electric cars, in a lot of ways, is very different to a combustion engine vehicle. But they've spent a lot of time to kind of get those Mini characteristics in and essentially make it fun to drive. I think if a Mini isn't fun to drive, especially it is fun. And honestly, the JCW electrics are extremely fun to drive. So,
you know, I remember there was an Italian advertising campaign of a Mini in Italy, and it was titled "Mini is not a car, it's a lifestyle." And I think it's still like that. It's not only a car. It's one of those, it happens very seldom that a car is a lifestyle, not only a vehicle to propel you from one place to another. And I think BMW keeps it with the Mini.
It's still a community. I'm lucky, I travel all over the world to different markets. I think there's so many people that once they buy a Mini, they continue buying a Mini, the new generation. Obviously we have meet-up events where there's a mix of classic and more modern Minis. So it is definitely a community. There's very few brands. There's a few I can name, but none like Mini in terms of the community aspect and how the community is just so passionate about the brand.
Yeah. And last question, maybe it's a little stupid, but I don't know, you know, the backstage of the company. John Cooper Works brand in let's say Surbiton days.
Yep. Surbiton, yeah.
Surbiton days. Well, it was in this workshop and so on and so on. Now it is connected with BMW. Do you still do some, for those special versions branded with John Cooper Works, do still some parts of it or some engineering works are carried in somewhere in your workshops, or it is all in BMW workshops? And yeah, well, and is there some kind of cooperation between your engineers and BMW engineers, or is it all on the BMW side?
So
now,
going right back to the start, obviously the John Cooper Works brand was purely started by my father, and it was just a tuning arm. So it started after the Mini had launched, so roughly around 2002. My grandfather passed away the turn of the century, so he saw the launch of the new Mini, or the Mini Cooper, which was the first one. So it started off as purely tuning with the engineering team my dad started. Wanted to take the car racing, but also make the new Mini a bit sportier, the new Mini Cooper.
Yeah.
It was a bit like when my grandfather did the original Mini Cooper. It was so successful that BMW said this has gone beyond our expectations. They did. My father had the idea with the Mini team to do the GP, which was the last kit. So it was a vehicle you could go and buy. It was supposed to be track focused. Obviously had only 2 seats. So that was when BMW moved it all production onto the production line. It became an option that you could buy in Plant Oxford, and they fully bought out the brand in 2008, 2009. So that was kind of a slowdown. The engineering team still worked on some BMW products, the same engineers that worked on JCW. Now it's mainly a BMW developed product. Like I said, I'm still lucky I get to work more on kind of brand directions. I'm a brand ambassador, so the family involvement is more soft touch than hard engineering, let's say. But the team are lucky. I'm lucky enough that the team let me try some of the vehicles out sometimes, and I give my feedback. And I obviously race them. So I got to race pre-production F66, the current combustion model at the Nürburgring 24-hour race. So I get to put it through its paces a little bit. And
you are still in it.
We're still involved. I'm still involved. My father still occasionally works with the Mini team. So we have to be thankful for the BMW group for looking after the Mini brand, but also keeping the family involved. And I like to think it's part of the continuing story is keeping the family close to the brand.
It's really fantastic. 3 generations.
4 generations. So my great grandfather, So Charles, who I'm named after, Charles Cooper. He started the Cooper car company,
With the racing cars.
Exactly, yeah.
And with your grandfather, they did it. Then your grandfather with your father. And then
I sketched the first JCW logo for when I was still a student. Yeah.
Oh, great! Have you got this sketch somewhere?
Somewhere, yeah. I've got it somewhere at home.
And do you visit sometimes the Surbiton? Yeah,
it's now a Porsche.
I heard it's a Porsche dealer or
classic cars, classic Porsches. But we have we know the owners, and we have meetups, Cooper meetups and events there. I think there's an event in a couple of weeks as well, so we're quite regularly there.
I remember there was a young boy, schoolboy, who wanted to save the Surbiton. He made some found, I think. He wanted to the Surbitons that would stay because. Was it true that they wanted to demolish this car?
There was some plans.
Yeah,
the family, we sold the building a number of years ago. But I'm always pushing Mini to do more of a heritage centre in the UK that could have some Cooper. We're lucky we still have Jackie Stewart's Cooper race car in the family and a few of the old race cars. So I definitely think a heritage centre would be a good thing.
Charlie, I won't torture you anymore.
No, I've enjoyed it. It's really fun.
I enjoyed really what you told us. It's really very interesting, and well, thank you very much that you found time. I don't know whether I should do it in front of cameras, but I would like to ask you for one thing. I took a driver's manual of my Mini. Could you sign it for me?
Of course, yeah.
Because it's a Mini Cooper Sport Pack.
Oh, I'd love to.
So it's connected with your name.
Oh, brilliant.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. There was an anniversary edition for the Cooper Car Company a few years ago that we did, and we put all our signatures on. So we had my grandfather's signature, my father's and mine. But my father is actually John Michael Cooper, so his signature is the same as this.
I see, yeah.
Jeżeli chcesz prenumerować magazyn Classic Auto, zapraszamy na stronę www.classicautomag.pl/sklep. Link znajduje się w opisie tego odcinka.